Now,
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
Let's go. It's 5:06. It's O'Connor and Company, and just like the Washington Commanders, we're 2-0 on the season, Julie Gunlock. We're doing
exciting.
Better than expected, you and I are. Coming up at 7:05, Joe DeGenevo will join us. He's also undefeated. 7:45, Trevor Maddich will give us his breakdown on how they looked yesterday in Denver. And at 8:05, Tristan Levitt. Now, he's with a group called Empower Oversight. They represent Gary Shepley, the IRS whistleblower, who really has been the most important cog in how the Biden scandals have moved toward an impeachment process. And, of course, guess what? They're going after this guy, Gary Shepley. They want to put him in jail. They are trying to, we'll talk to Tristan Levitt about his client, person that they represent there, and how important whistleblowers are. We'll get to all of that coming up. Your weekend was good? You happy with your weekend?
It was. It's fall ball, so watched my son play baseball.
Oh, baseball.
Yes.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Because football is kind of happening right now, too.
So we had a doubleheader on Sunday. It was
That's
very fun.
very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was a beautiful weekend.
It
Great
really
weather.
was.
Great time at the Travis Manion 9/11 Heroes Run.
Oh, great.
Down in Oakton with the Fairfax crew. And then so I got to give my opening remarks there and talk about the Travis Manion Foundation and service and about, all of that stuff. And then the race started. I went and had a beer, Well, no, I would have run with them, but I had to get back.
Wait, wasn't it in the morning?
It was at 8 a.m.
And then you went and had a beer?
No, I didn't have it.
Okay, I was kidding.
Well, there was a beer eventually yesterday, but no, I went up to Annapolis. I did lots of driving.
Yes.
Because then their 9/11 Heroes Run was later in the morning, and we participated.
And did you run in that one?
It's funny. I didn't. Let me just say,
this is a no. Folks.
No, I did. I ran remote. I didn't because I didn't register for the Annapolis one. It turned out because I ended up doing because I was going to be speaking at Oakton, and I couldn't guarantee I could make it back in time. Mm-hmm. So I didn't officially register, but I did run. In fact, I did 4 miles instead of just
for you. You also did some yard work. I saw on Twitter.
Well, I was enjoying a cigar
yes, you
while
were.
my friend Tommy was doing the yard work. But yes, I did. All of my friends have cameras around, and like a private moment when I'm taking a little break from weeding. Becomes sort of this very fake news narrative.
Sure.
That I was having my friend do all the work, and I was just
I
sitting
remember
there.
when I went over to your house recently, and you were saying, "Are your boys available to do the yard work?" Don't even try, Larry.
I hate yard work. All right, let's get to the news, shall we?
Yes.
Ken Paxton, Attorney General of Texas, who found himself on the wrong side of establishment Republicans in Texas and then facing impeachment charges, has been fully acquitted on every single one. They put 16 charges against him.
Wow.
I love hearing everybody decrying using impeachment as a political weapon when it comes to Joe Biden, but nobody's talking about exactly the same thing with Attorney General Ken Paxton in Texas. And let's be clear, he's just a little too Trumpy, they've decided. Mm-hmm. I said establishment Republicans, to understand Texas politics, and I'm not from Texas, but I know a lot of Texans. Basically, if you want to succeed in Texas, you have to be a Republican. There's no way for a Democrat. How many times from Ann Richards to Beto O'Rourke to, remember, what did Eric Erickson call her? Abortion Barbie? What was that woman's name?
I remember.
Who did the filibuster with her tennis shoes on. And of course, she crashed and burned. Yeah. They always find their superstar Democrat who's going to change things. Game changer.
That's right.
It's a Republican state. Stop it.
Yeah.
So if you want to succeed politically in Texas, you have to be a Republican. That means a lot of people in another state who would normally be a Democrat end up running as Republicans. And they're not, all Republicans are not made the same.
Yeah.
I assure you. And portions of the Republican Party in Texas who have, achieved at relatively high levels there, they found themselves on the wrong side of Ken Paxton, or Ken Paxton found himself on the wrong side of them. Ken Paxton, and again, I'll be honest, I don't know all of the details of this impeachment process, but I checked in on a lot of the testimony that Paxton's lawyers were questioning the key witnesses, and they had nothing. They fell apart. They actually alerted the FBI of a so-called crime that Ken Paxton had committed and he admitted on the stand he had zero evidence. He had, I think, I had a hunch. You call the FBI on a hunch.
How did it even get that far?
And then, of course, politics.
Of course.
Politics. There's a low threshold there for these things. And so he has been officially 100% acquitted. Attorney General Ken Paxton, like I said, I admit I don't know all of the details, but it looked like he got railroaded and it was purely political. I do know this about Ken Paxton. He has been the tip of the spear utilizing his office to go against the rogue Biden administration at the federal level and finding them great. Are you concerned about the border? Are you happy that the Biden administration has been forced to defend DACA? Thank Ken Paxton for that. DACA, by the way, just got shot down by a federal judge last week. You like the fact that the Biden administration was forced to re-implement the Remain in Mexico policy? Thank Ken Paxton for that. He forced these issues at federal court as the Attorney General representing the people of Texas. He also had a failed attempt to re-examine how Pennsylvania came up with their electoral college count. Remember, he led an effort, which I thought was a valid one, saying, listen, our Texas electoral college votes are being undermined by what they did in Pennsylvania with their electoral college votes in 2020. Now, the Supreme Court refused to hear that case, but I think it was a valid one. But this is the kind of fighting that Ken Paxton has been doing. And so they had to get rid of him.
Wow.
But they didn't. He lives to fight another day, and I believe he's going to be a guest on this program Wednesday morning. So
great.
we'll look forward to having him here.
Yeah.
So that's that news. Did you follow any of that, or did you see any of the testimony?
I really didn't. I will before Wednesday, though.
Yeah.
I'll catch up.
Well, this is my favorite part, and he has told the Biden administration to, after he survived this impeachment trial, to buckle up. That's what he said. I hope Biden better buckle up. He said, the sham impeachment coordinated by the Biden administration with liberal House Speaker Dade Phelan and his kangaroo court has cost taxpayers millions of dollars, disrupted the work of the Office of Attorney General, and left a dark and permanent stain on the Texas House. The weaponization of the impeachment process to settle political differences is not only wrong, it is immoral and corrupt.
Can I ask, since you obviously followed this a lot closer, where was did the Bush family at all?
Well, so a lot of these guys are affiliated with the Bush political machine of Texas
that were critical of him.
Yes,
and that joined in impeaching him.
Yes. Now, I will admit though that the lines do sometimes get blurred down there. But if you remember when Rick Perry became governor of Texas, he won the nomination against George W. Bush's appointed successor, who was then his lieutenant governor, who was seen as way too moderate, if not even liberal,
who was
again
that?
as
Do you
a
remember the
Republican.
name?
Oh, darn you. I did.
I shouldn't have asked that.
No,
I'm sorry.
you're right. I had it on the tip of my...
It's funny.
When I was thinking about it this morning, I did have his name. It was... I did.
It's right there.
But anyway, Perry beat him.
Okay.
And then became governor, I think, 3 consecutive terms, if I remember right. So there is definitely a divide there. But at the same time, Perry was still, on good terms with Bush. But some of those machine politicians that
broke it up a little.
Very affiliated with the Bush sort of machine.
But
they engineered this.
Okay.
Not the Bushes. I mean, the Bush machine.
But there's been no statement from Bush about this.
No,
situation.
not that I've seen.
Interesting.
Not that I've seen. But I think I can assure you, Ken Paxton, in the same way Donald Trump is not a George W. Bush family approved kind of Republican, Ken Paxton also is not a Bush kind of Republican in the state of Texas. Now, that's not to demean the Bush family in any way. I'm just saying there are 2 different kinds of Republicans down there.
Oh, we know. Yeah.
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 Finally, continuing Paxton's statement. Finally, I can promise the Biden administration the following: buckle up, because your lawless policies will not go unchallenged. We will not allow you to shred the Constitution and infringe on the rights of Texans. You will be held accountable. He's been a regular guest on this program. I've interviewed him multiple times on other platforms, but he went, as soon as he got impeached, he was like, you know what? I'm going to focus on this. He stepped away from his office and allowed a deputy to run the office while he was out, but he is back as of today. Good for Ken Paxton.
Yeah, that's great.
It's 5:15 WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First on the 5.
News Talk 105.9.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
I always like to go to Twitter to see if people, because usually when I forget somebody's name, like within 30 seconds, somebody on Twitter will tell me, but people are still in bed right now, or they're in the restroom. They don't have their phone with them. They didn't put their glasses on. I'm painting a vivid picture, aren't I?
Yes, that's enough.
Gary Shapley is the whistleblower from the IRS. He's really, through the Ways and Means Committee, he really has helped put so many of the pieces together as to why this impeachment process needs to go forward. Specifically, the lies of Merrick Garland under oath saying that David Weiss, the U.S. attorney from Delaware, had full power to bring charges, even in jurisdictions outside of Delaware. He can bring L.A., absolutely. D.C., absolutely. Nope. We learn now, thanks to Gary Shapley, where he cataloged in meetings that he had and then sent an email. I love Gary Shapley for sending this email around right after the meeting to everybody in the meeting. This is what was just said.
Yes.
And FBI agents and other IRS agents says, yep, that's what was said.
That's my memory as well.
And that's David Weiss saying, yeah, I don't have the power. I'm not the decision maker. I can't bring these charges. It's going to have to come from the Justice Department. So in other words, Merrick Garland, the political appointee of Joe Biden, was running interference for his boss, keeping charges from being brought against Hunter Biden, thus allowing the statute of limitations to go out. Not only did Merrick Garland lie about that under oath, but so did David Weiss, because he provided a statement to the Senate Judiciary Committee saying, oh, yeah, I have full power. He didn't have full power.
But at least both of those guys have been fired.
Right. Oh, exactly. No. David Weiss been promoted, of course.
I know. Yes.
So Tristan Levitt, who's going to be joining us later on in the program at 8:05, he represents Gary Shapley. And he has alerted us. Now, there's a Politico article backing this up. Hunter Biden's attorneys are basically accusing IRS whistleblowers of breaking the law and pushing the Biden administration to prosecute the whistleblowers. We have whistleblower laws specifically to protect people in cases like this. The law is clearly on the side of Gary Shapley, and yet they continue to come out and say that he has broken the law. Reading from Tristan Levitt, our guest coming up at 8 o'clock, whether their goal is to actually affect a retaliatory prosecution of the whistleblower or argue a tainted jury pool in the gun case or just muddy the waters on the entire process is unclear. Maybe all of the above. Regardless, this shows how clearly desperate they are.
I'm reading this Politico piece, which is very thorough, and maybe I've missed it, but have you heard if they're going over or after the second whistleblower, Joseph Ziegler? He testified with...
He came about a month later.
Right. And he says, I'm a Democrat, I voted for Biden, but he corroborated everything. So are they also going after him?
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but we can certainly ask Tristan Levitt that when we have him at 8:05. I'm not sure. But,
interesting.
But there's another aspect of this that is important. The Justice Department under Joe Biden has been irrevocably tainted by this entire political process, and as well as the the Accountability Office, USAO. What is USAO?
Never heard of that. That's weird.
This is the it's not the Science of Arts in Oklahoma. All right, well, here, let me read Tristan Levitt's. I can't emphasize enough the timing referenced in the thread below. USA Graves is overriding the career DC USAO staff was at the end of March 2022, right as the White House announced that President Biden still believed his son had done nothing wrong. So, in other words, the Justice Department overrode career personnel officials in swapping out people who were overseeing this process at the IRS and at the Justice Department to put Biden cronies in there to help swing the pendulum away from investigating Hunter Biden. And the timing, as he points out, this is when in March of 2022, when Biden gave that interview and they said, well, we're hearing a lot about what your son did. And he says, I stand by my son. My son did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And then suddenly personnel changes are put in place. Obstruction of justice. That is obstruction of justice.
Yes.
Textbook obstruction of justice.
But there's no evidence, Larry.
Oh, I know. Yes. Republicans are moving without any evidence to impeach President Biden. Let's not forget that. It's 5:23. All right. It is now 5:30 in the nation's capital. We're going to hear the news headlines. And when we come back, we're going to tell this story about a murder in New York that once again shows you exactly how horrific our society is getting, all under the watchful eye of these prosecutors that have two things in common. You used to say they have one thing. It's like, oh, they're all Democrats. No, this is a certain kind of Democrat. It's the George Soros-backed Democrats. We'll tell you what's going on in New York next.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
News now. Now,
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
5:36. It's O'Connor and Company here on a Monday morning in your nation's capital. At 7:05, Joe DeGenevo will be our guest. 7:45, Trevor Maddich on the Commanders' victory yesterday. And then at 8:05, Tristan Levitt. He's representing Gary Shapley, the IRS whistleblower. We'll get into all those details that we just mentioned, what appears to be continued obstruction of justice there by the Biden administration and the Merrick Garland Justice Department. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
Julie, sometimes it feels like we have a front row seat here in giving play-by-play to the downfall of Western civilization. When you see some of the stories that are going on in the news. And we try to be positive and upbeat, but it's hard to when you see the horrific crime that's occurring in cities, including Washington, D.C., and in other jurisdictions like New York City. And we have a litany of stories here that just sort of show this continuing degradation of basic humanity. And somebody needs to call a halt to it. And the problem is, in these Democrat-dominated cities, they are doubling down and bringing in these prosecutors who are just fine keeping criminals on the street. In fact, they think it's a virtue to not prosecute criminals.
And we're about to talk about a really horrible murder, but I mean, this goes beyond. You know, it's not just these horrific, very serious crimes. I mean, it's the racing on 495 that happens all the time. It's these little dirt bikes that are terrorizing tourists in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
It's the shoplifting. It's the carjacking.
That's right. Oh, thank you. This is directly connected. A man getting executed in cold blood on the streets of New York is directly connected to people just standing by in broad daylight, letting someone go into a drugstore and clear out the shelves into a garbage bag.
Yeah, no consequence. Absolutely nothing.
Out.
Yes.
So surveillance video has captured an 80-year-old man in the Bronx getting executed, is the only word to describe it, by a guy on a bicycle clad in black from head to toe, including a black ski mask. This 80-year-old man was getting out of his car and walking into his home at 1 a.m. They
had just left a Sweet 16 party.
16 party. And this guy on the bike drives past once, circles back, comes back again, and shoots him twice.
He was with his family. This 80-year-old man was with his wife walking into their home, he and his wife. And I believe his family members that were at the party had dropped them off, and they were in the car, and everyone saw that. I mean, the wife was standing right with her husband, and then the family members witnessed it from the car. It was a horrific scene.
Well, and also in New York, well, and because there's video of it. Now, the video does edit out the moment. I don't want you to think that you're watching a snuff film here.
Although there's another video we'll talk about in a minute.
There's one where you're actually seeing the murder of a man. This one is out of Las Vegas, where two teenagers have carjacked, and we've seen this trend in D.C., where teenagers as young as 12 years old, that's not a teenager, 12-year-olds are carjacking cars and then taking them for joyrides. In Las Vegas, these two teenagers got a stolen car, rode it, videoed the entire time, and then specifically rode up behind a guy on a bicycle and just plowed right into him.
This is, if you've never seen the movie Mad Max 1979, the first one, this is like straight out of dystopian sort of Mad Max scene. It was crazy. And yes, plowed right through him. He goes over the car. He hits the windshield, goes over the car. And then the camera, the punk who's recording this whole thing, pans back and you see this man lying in the street.
Yeah. By the way, this man's name, Andreas Probst. I apologize. I don't remember who did this on social media. It may even been Elon Musk, actually, because Elon Musk has been talking about this all weekend.
Yes.
This video of this man riding a bicycle by himself in the bike lane in Las Vegas, and these two, and only the driver has been arrested.
Right.
And is
they're
in
laughing,
custody.
By the way.
They're laughing at it.
He says, "I'm going to get this one."
Yeah.
And right before the driver actually hits a white vehicle and sends that white vehicle flying off the road. So they were looking to murder.
And the person's name is Andreas Probst, who got murdered by these two, the victim. And if you go to the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and other websites and search that name, you won't find it.
No, but read that.
Because there's no coverage. And then the headline of the Las Vegas Journal Review, which is the local newspaper that covers such things, Let me give you the headline on this, because this is, I mean, it's.
I think it said
You
the
know,
man
it's right
killed
here.
in a.
I've got
oh,
it.
you
I've got it. So the headline in the Las Vegas Journal-Review, which is the local newspaper where this crime took place: retired police chief killed in bike crash.
Ugh.
Remembered for laugh, love of coffee.
That is what they will. The media does not want to cover.
Crash.
Yes, it was a bike crash, but does not want to cover the crime, which is directly because of the Biden administration's soft on crime policies.
Yes.
And these Soros prosecutors. They do not want this narrative to get out there. They don't want it to catch fire. And so they're going to call it a bike crash.
Yeah.
There
And if this were, if it's funny how, you know, the seminal video in Minneapolis with the cop, killing the guy who created all the Black Lives Matter riots. I'm blanking on his name now. Having a great morning. George Floyd. Thank you. The George Floyd moment. So you've got this video of George Floyd, and that video is everywhere. And it becomes this flashpoint for riots.
Well, then, and all cops are evil.
Of course,
right.
and all cops are evil. And
yes.
we have a movement in every city, and you've got every politician
but this
taking
is a bike
knee.
crash.
And this is described as a bike crash.
And the
in
coverage.
any other time in our news cycle, this video of these two men, these two punks killing this guy would be everywhere. But it's not, and I'm going to tell you why it's not. Because the victim is white. And the two people in the car, I haven't even mentioned this. It hasn't been, you wouldn't think it would be necessary,
it does matter.
but it matters in terms of why they're not showing the
Yep.
story, because the two thugs who are responsible for this murder are black.
Yeah,
and that's the bottom line. I'm sorry to say it, but that's why this isn't getting coverage, because you know that if it were reversed, this would be the flashpoint for protests everywhere.
Yeah. The headline for the 80-year-old man who was executed is going to be man accidentally comes into contact with a bullet. I mean, I don't know how they're going to swing that one. But, yeah, this is a major, major problem. And again, I think I've said this a million times on the show. It all comes back to the media coverage of this. It's so dangerous to have a media that covers up for the Democrats.
There are literally people in newsrooms who can screen stories like this and say, "Oh yeah, let's not focus on that. Let's not put attention to that, because that plays into stereotypes, and it just riles people up. So we're just going to put that on the back page, if at all." It's 5:44. And now one more tragic story out of New York, so you can see exactly where we're headed here. And this one has to do with, yes, the attitude with regard to crime and looking the other way for drug use up in New York, but also directly related to the disastrous border policy that this administration has implemented, or refused to implement, frankly, since day one. As you know, there are huge numbers of illegal immigrants that are now in New York. No, it has nothing to do with Texas or other states shipping people up there. Most of them are actually getting up there via the Biden administration.
That's right.
That's just documented fact.
Yep.
I forget what the mayor of New York is screaming about, how he's got 20,000 a month. The total number of illegal migrants who have been sent up to New York via Governor Abbott in Texas is 13,000 total over the course of a year. So 20,000 a month versus 13,000, 1,000 a month coming from Texas. Trust me. The problem is the border itself. So here we go. There is a daycare center in the Bronx, and they have all these little babies coming in there, right, and hanging out because mommy has to work, or daddy has to work, or there is no daddy, who knows. And this it's hard to tell the story and look at this picture of this little child.
Yeah.
21-month-old, so less than 2 years old, a toddler, Nicholas Felice Dominici, died from exposure to fentanyl at this Bronx daycare because the owners of the daycare allowed one of the rooms there in the space to be utilized by a brand new Honduran person.
New arrival.
New arrival, they like to call him.
from the Dominican Republic.
Oh, forgive me.
I
Thank
said that.
you.
I said Honduras earlier.
Yeah. From the Dominican Republic. New arrival is a euphemism for an illegal immigrant. And so they, I guess, rented out a space to this guy, and he had fentanyl in his room.
He had a kilo of fentanyl, but he also had a
kilo.
He had a way to press, so he was probably a dealer.
Turning the fentanyl into pills or what have you.
Yeah.
This 21-month-old just got exposed to it in the air and is dead. And the woman who runs the daycare has not been arrested.
It is It is just so incredibly heartbreaking. He'll probably be off and on the streets. Probably
Well, of
already
course.
is.
Why shouldn't
Probably,
he?
that was Friday. He's probably already
Yeah, given their
looking for a new room.
So Friday afternoon, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and a bunch of other Democrats from New York held a press briefing out on the streets of Manhattan. And their point was to try to get more federal money to help New York with the and AOC's whole plan here is open borders. Let's just process them and
absolutely.
give them their citizenship faster. The problem there is that we're not processing them fast enough so that they can come out and take your jobs and get your kids in your school and then vote to keep Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in power.
She has this whole welfare is bad narrative too, which is kind of interesting. She gets up there and she says, look, these people want to work. Let's give them some sort of ability, a permit so that they can get jobs, right? Because we don't want them on the federal dole. So let's let them work and take jobs from New Yorkers, of course, right?
So, but here's what happened, because New York is done.
New Yorkers
are done. So listen to what happens when AOC tries to preach this pablum, and the people actually have a say.
With that?
Yes, and ultimately I think that there are 3 points of consensus here that are very...
They're screaming, close the border.
I love she goes, there's consensus.
Yeah.
While people are freaking
We've got
out.
total consensus. Everyone agrees with me.
important in getting a solution to this issue. The first is that there is consensus here across geography and states on increased federal resources to cities and municipalities dealing with this issue. The second is to allow for work authorizations so that folks in here can get to work and start supporting themselves as soon as possible. They are prevented from getting jobs, they are prevented from employment, and that is part of the strain on our public systems. The faster that folks can access the work that they're asking for legally, the better we can solve this problem.
Legally, yeah. But you got to love it. And the video is fantastic. Jerry Nadler looks like he's completely shell-shocked. It's like, who are these people? What the hell happened here? What is this, MAGA country? It's like Jussie Smollett must have felt when he got his Subway sandwich in the middle of the night in Chicago. But you just have to have a brain that no longer functions to think this way. I'm sorry. And again, my criticism is not of your, great, lovely aunt who always votes Democrat because she loves John F. Kennedy. It's people like this who actually stand up there and say that these people who have gone out of their way to travel thousands of miles to illegally cross our border, insert themselves into our system, demand to be housed, demand to be fed, demand to be clothed, demand to put their kids in your school, and demand to get medical assistance. And now she's saying, well, we're the problem because we're not letting them work here.
Right. Larry, we've often looked at these problems in society, and, it's pretty clear. The Democrats, they do this all the time. They create a problem, and then they come in, and it's going to take government to solve the problem, whether that's funding or more programs or more access. Yeah. And she does that very clearly here, where she says, we need to get these people working so that they can support themselves. So essentially she uses this sort of line that is very fundamental to us, which people should support themselves and be off welfare. Yeah. But it's not working. And I just love the fact that she says there's consensus while people are literally screaming at her. Because again, the solution is to close the border.
Right. But you're absolutely right. We need more federal dollars, and we need to change our laws to allow these people to work so we can solve the problem that was created in the first place because we opened the border against everybody's best judgment. As Governor Scott Walker, president of Young America's Foundation, said on social media, the problem with liberalism today is that sooner or later they run out of other places to put illegal aliens.
I loved how you called that very Thatcherian.
It's a little Maggie going on there. It's 5:54.